Yeah, so welcome to the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize talk series for 2020. This is the first talk of this year's prize. Thanks again to Ashurst for hosting and organising. We've got CASART sponsoring again. We've got Genesis Imaging, and we've got Rich Mix as well. So brilliant to have them on board for the 6th year. Hopefully many of you know our vision is to support emerging artists. It isn't just a prize where we award cash and exhibitions. We do these talks to help give emerging artists some useful information for their career development, how to promote themselves, and how to create their own stepping stones and create opportunity for themselves. And it is also to find the next promising artists as much as we can, and also to put on great exhibitions. So on display now, we've got the winners for the 2019 prize in the space here. And actually, sorry, this is our new home. It's our new home for the prize. I'd like to introduce the panel guests today. And I'll start off with asking them to tell us a bit more about themselves. So maybe to start with, Melanie Lenz is curator at the V&A. We've got Avril Kirchi, who's independent art advisor. And we've got Charlie Schaefer, who was shortlisted for the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize in 2016. And just recently won the BP Portrait Prize for this year. One thing I missed, so part of this talk is help us get to know a little bit about two of the judges. We've got around 10 judges this year, but that's too big for one panel. So we've got these two. So for all three of you, actually, Melanie first, can you describe your art career and any sort of current projects you're working on?
I work at the Victoria and Albert Museum here in London as a curator of digital art, and it's a role that I've done over a number of years. And during that time, the role itself has developed. I'm responsible for a collection of primarily early digital art from the 1960s and 70s, but I also collect contemporary artworks as well. So part of my role involves looking for new artists, acquiring works, thinking about how best to document and store and archive new acquisitions. I work very closely with artists, thinking about how their careers developed. And prior to my job there, I also had another role in education as well, working with programming digital artworks, which is a slightly different aspect to acquiring works for the collection. I would maybe commission artists to do works for festivals. So two different aspects, but always around the idea of digital and new media. And prior to that, I've always worked in national galleries. So whether that's Tate Modern, Tate Britain, Barbican, or always working with mostly creative technologists and artists.
Great, thanks again for having me. I come from a more commercial side of things. My background is mainly in galleries. My specialty is in photography. And I began my career working for a private photography dealer in New York City. Then in 2007 moved to one of Italy's very few contemporary photography galleries called Brancolini Grimaldi. And that gallery decided to move to London, interestingly. I think the market in Italy was a bit more challenging for contemporary photography. So we decided London would be a good place. So we moved here in 2011. And there we were working with initially kind of mid-career emerging artists. When we moved to London, we worked specifically with a curator called Paul Womble. And we sort of restructured our program and had a good focus on adding quite a few women artists and also British artists. So that was a really interesting process to go through. More recently, I've been doing art advisory work with a main focus in photography. And in the last 6 months, I've been appointed as the curator of an online platform that will champion the work of and sell the work of emerging artists. And there will also be a kind of mentorship side of that too. And we're looking to launch next year. So early days, and we're just in the building phases of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Charlie?
So I guess mine's a lot more selfish than those two, which is that I am a painter. I paint people. I would always avoid the term portrait painter, I guess, because portrait insinuates you're trying to capture an image or the essence of that other person, whereas the reason I paint people is I've never really been one of those people who can get up in the day and just make work for themselves. You know, I kind of need the motivation. And if I spend time on my own, I basically just get sad, lonely and depressed. So I get people to come and sit for me, and you talk throughout the whole experience. Someone comes, sits 2 or 3 times a week for 3 hours at a time. You're sitting there, you're talking. I'm trying to make a picture, which is responding to the experience. So although I paint people, I wouldn't call it portrait, because for me, it's the experience of painting someone that I'm actually there for. It's all about the experience. The actual painting at the end is more a byproduct of that experience. So the act of painting is the thing that allows me to spend time with that person, but it's not about the picture itself. So many times I can spend 6 months on a painting and then just throw it away, because it's not actually about that final image. And if it doesn't feel like it's encapsulating and is directly influenced by the experience, then it becomes artificial and it becomes purely image for image sake. I think we can all agree that there are enough images out in the world as it is. So it's trying to figure out what you can actually benefit, what I can benefit from the actual act of art, the act of creating, the act of painting. And I've learned what it is, which is being able to spend time with people in a particularly intimate way, which is ironic that I then won the BP Portrait Prize, because then people think I'm a portrait painter, which has been a little bit of a balancing act, to say the least. But yeah.
The first main question I'll ask is, how might you highlight the differences between selecting artworks and artists offline versus online? And prices have changed considerably with the internet and things like that, where you'd often have to send in paintings. So my first question for Averil and Melanie is how this might affect an entry, and how you might even select artworks.
What's really integral in that process, as opposed to physically sending in an artwork, is making sure that you're able to communicate all the things that you want to through the application. So using the application form to the absolute best of your ability, not leaving any blank spaces, never making assumptions that the person who's viewing it knows exactly what it is, how you've made it, why you've made it, or some of the ideas and the inspirations behind it. So whether it's through the artist's statement, or whether you're able to provide supplementary material, information about the work, even if it's as simple as, say, dimensions, which aren't always conveyed through an image. If it's meant to be a particular resolution, or there's something really specific that's integral to that work, it's so important to put it into the application form, because I've seen many forms which just haven't included them. And unless I happen to know already about that artwork, I just wouldn't know, and so much is lost.
On my end, it would be, I think, a frustration sometimes when I was judging this past edition, that with one image, you feel a little constrained. So it certainly helped having more. Obviously, in a non-prize offline context, you have the breadth of the artist's body of work, past work, current work. You really get a really deep understanding, and that's incredibly helpful. One image makes it really hard. So I sort of would encourage you to include more than one, just to help us really visualize what you're all about. So in that sense, really try to contextualize what you do. In normal, in sort of gallery context, you get to meet the artist. So you get a really direct connection. You get a real flavor of what they're all about. So that's something that you then have to translate to your artist statement. That is your moment to really shine, get your personality across, distinguish yourself. So really use words to try to communicate everything that you care to communicate. And then again, one of the sort of frustrating parts is not being able to see the artwork in the flesh. I think there's a lot. I really believe in the importance of creating an object, whether it's the paper that you print on, the frame that you use, how you present your work is so much of what you're doing, and you shouldn't discount that. So trying to understand that during the judging process can be quite difficult, but that's why the shortlist sort of section then helps you really see what the artworks look like in the flesh, to then be able to choose winners from there. So that's really helpful. Yeah.
Probably a good way of thinking about it is when you see an artwork and it's on a beautiful white wall and there's a spotlight on it. It's framed. So often you won't see this, but especially with photography, you won't see this. You see a JPEG of that image. It's on your screen. It's surrounded by 10,000 unopened emails and things like that. There's a whole different experience, and how you balance that is quite tricky. Maybe another good example is if your painting's very impasto, it's thick, it's three-dimensionality of the paint itself, sometimes you won't see it, but a good way of fixing that is lighting it from a certain angle, taking a super high resolution picture of it. And then when we see it on our screen, then we get a much better idea, a much closer idea of what the painting should look like. It's still not always easy. It's still quite tough. But there's things you can sort of try and bridge that gap between offline and a JPEG image. Maybe, do you have any?
Yeah, I was going to say that so I've been entering things for the last 7 or 8 years now, and you get used to rejection is one thing I can say, is get used to rejection. So I was getting rejected by about 2 things a week, but I've won a fair few prizes before the BP as well. So you get rejected by a lot, but every now and then you get something that makes it all worthwhile. So if you earn any money whatsoever, put it back into entering things. That is one way to get your work out there, get it seen. It's worth doing, even though it can seem very demoralizing at times and like it's sucking up all your money. So definitely do it. The other thing is put a lot of time and effort into photographing your work. Because for me, I'm a painter. I'm not very good with a camera. But actually learning how to edit photos, they're going to see, if you're a judge, you see an image surrounded by thousands of other images. You've got to make sure that your image stands out and it works and it actually grabs their attention. And then hopefully after that, they'll spend more time looking into it and seeing the nuances of it. But you have to remember, just be aware of what you're entering. You might really care for your piece of art and your own work and have a personal connection to it. But if you're putting it out there into a competition, you have to be aware of how it's going to be perceived, which means you need to make it actually grab their attention, stand out from the others, and then go into it, which I suppose comes into another question, which is basically just always be aware of the competition that you're entering. So keep in mind the kind of competition that you're going in for. There's no point going into an abstract competition with a figurative painting. You know, even if you've got your supposed morals as an artist, always be aware of what type of thing they're looking for in that competition and then put forward works accordingly that you think are worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. This kind of ties in a little bit about how the entry process is online versus a curator or a gallery director. So Avril, how did you discover and select artists for the gallery you previously worked for, and for your current clients? How do you select artworks? How do you?
Yeah, different process. With the gallery, we didn't work by accepting submissions from artists, which is really tough. I do realize a lot of galleries do offer submissions, and I think that's a really fair and great thing. So definitely keep your eyes out for galleries that accept online submissions. We happened at the time to work quite specifically through our own personal research of traveling, fairs, exhibitions, and also, as I mentioned earlier, Paul Womble, a curator. So curators, not just him, but many other curators, are a great source of information for sourcing new artists. So I would urge you to sort of befriend and get yourself out there and network and really understand who the curators in your networks and your communities are, because I think I don't know if you'd agree, but it's an interesting element to approach, definitely. As an advisor, it's a slightly different game. I'm working specifically with a client's interests in mind, and those can vary so wildly. So I do just a lot of research of all sorts of different artists, from emerging to established. I keep them on file, and I think it's sometimes directly through artists, which is interesting, and that could be my research through seeing them in open studios or online too, just through Instagram. But it could be directly through galleries, as often happens. Yeah. And then now with the more recent project, it's emerging artist centric. So looking at recent graduates, open studios, and nowadays Instagram, you can't ignore. Yeah.
On to Melanie. So Melanie, yeah. So how do you select artists for the exhibitions you curate, or maybe give us 1 or 2 examples of how you've come across them and met them?
Yeah. So many of the ways in which have already been mentioned through exhibitions and through studio visits and open studios. I go to a lot of open studios, graduate shows. But for exhibitions, it's a little bit different because there'll already be an exhibition concept, and I'm looking for artists that fit that concept. So prizes like this are fantastic opportunities for me, selfishly, because it enables me to see lots of different work which doesn't have any parameters. Everyone's working in many different ways, and they're not restricted by trying to squeeze them into a particular idea for a show. So I think a lot of ways in which I meet artists. Some is through prizes. I do regularly check who's won different prizes, and personal recommendations. I'm part of different curatorial expertise groups where we talk about different things that we've been to and different artists that excite us. And we all go home and write down the same names and then go in. And so word of mouth is a big thing. Increasingly, I spend a lot of time online. I will check people's websites to see what they're doing, magazines and interviews, blogs, personal blogs as well. Sometimes it can be quite hard to necessarily get yourself written about. So it's maybe finding somebody that you know who's good at writing, or yourself you're good at writing. Often people take the initiative on themselves, whether that's to host their own exhibition in whichever shape or form, open studios I've seen done really interestingly, not necessarily just always through galleries, but in unusual spaces. And equally, it's easier these days to self-publish. So that's primarily the different forms through which I come into contact with different artists.
So there's a few things in there I'm quite new to. So that's a good, brilliant answer for me. I've got here, what info might you compile when you're researching artists? But it sounds like it's much more informal. You talk to them and you try and go to their studios. And
yeah, for me, it's about relationships and it's about processes, because I like to meet people along the journey from when they graduate to hopefully when they're, established artists. I will often find people that at a particular point in their career, I can't work with them, but I will continue a relationship because I feel confident that in the future that we might be able to work together. And also, it's not always right for the artist to work with me. It works both ways.
Can I ask why that would be? Sorry.
Because I currently work, if I'm answering this question with my V&A hat on, that I have a very specific collection remit.
Okay.
It's
just your personal.
But then other curators will often get in touch with me and say, "Oh, I'm curating a show about this. Have you got any recommendations?" So although I not be able to collect their work, you
can spread the word.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's also something to bear in mind. I think there's this romantic idea that you should always get an exhibition straight away or a gallery straight away, and like you said, it's not always the right time and place. And I personally feel that as well, that there have been some potential gallery movements, but I'm not entirely sure what I would have gained from that. And we've just kind of stayed in touch, and it's more that hopefully, art is a long game. It's not like you just make something. Again, I think unfortunately, off the back of Saatchi and all of that, everyone thinks you make one piece and then suddenly you're famous and everything's done. It just doesn't work like that at all. It's a very slow trudge in the mud. So it's basically meet people who are important and you think are useful to you, and that you are useful to them, and you can actually form a relationship and just hold on to that. Life is all about relationships, and art is all about that as well. Just meet people that you think are worthwhile being around, and things will come out of it. But if you try and think instantaneously, where is this relationship going? I've met someone, what can I gain from them right here, right now? That just won't get you anywhere whatsoever. Just treat people like people, and it will help, honestly.
Probably a tough one. What do you look for in artists and artworks? Any clues to suggest they have potential? Maybe Melanie first.
First and foremost, I look at artworks. It really helps if the artist is great, but especially in relation to prizes, I'm looking at the integrity of work, and I'm thinking about not just about originality, but craftsmanship and what medium has been used and why has it been used. And the artwork for me really has to be strong, both conceptually and the way in which it's been, carried out, or where which it's been made. No, that sounds really fuzzy, but thinking about the variety of work that I see, it can't all, although we use the term new media, within that's an umbrella term, and I see a lot of different work and doesn't all neatly fit together. So I think what I look for when I'm looking at all of these different kinds of art is the idea that the work itself has to just be outstanding. Yeah, it really has to stand out and be an incredibly strong piece of work. It's subjective, but the criteria in which I use to judge something entails, thinking about what it is and how it's been made and process. I'm very interested in process.
But for the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize, we try to list sort of vaguely what we are looking for. And one of them is, is craftsmanship. It's skill of your medium. We've worded it that way, but it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
We don't expect you to be amazingly, perfectly skilled. Otherwise, you'd be with the gallery. You wouldn't be emerging. So we try to spot if you've got skill of your medium. Conceptually interesting is sort of the term I use in my head, but we mean you have some interesting themes that may be relevant. Maybe you could look at your artwork and say that's 2019, that's 2020, and sort of place it. Or maybe it uses ideas of sort of referencing art, some interesting ideas in art history or something like that. So we look for that, and of course the emerging descriptor is something we focus on quite a lot as well. But Avril, do you have?
I very much agree with what you both said. I mean, it's about the quality of the work, its content, composition, technique. Innovation sometimes catches you, but I don't think it's necessarily like hugely important. Again, let's go back to sort of written statements. I do think that's something that we look for as being quite developed, and very much that there's a thread that through the statement it echoes in the work. I think that's really, really important. And that there's an authenticity that comes out of that too. I think what we're looking for, do you mean that in the context of the prize or in general when we're looking for artists?
In general.
Yeah.
In general.
So I guess also just when you meet them, a kind of a personal confidence in what they're doing and a really strong sort of sense of passion for what they're their practice. I think it's really important to be able to convey that. Another really important thing for me is a kind of professionalism that can extend across maybe the way you write, but also the way you've researched and prepared yourself. If somebody emails you, can you send me your available works? That you have a PDF that's ready with the work there, the price is there, and it's looking good, and you don't take a week to make it because you've never made one before. So just make sure that you have, texts ready, a PDF ready, price list that's generally kind of incorporated or not. A well tended to website. Obviously, websites I notice more and more tend to be sort of left to the wayside, and Instagram is where all the action's happening. I do think you can't let your website go too much. So do try to keep it as up to date as possible because it's a very professional element of yourself and an outward looking, facade that you have to keep going.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
I think that's the thing that you're not really ever taught, definitely not at art school, is that once you leave, you don't just make art. You then have to do all of the things.
Yeah.
So you have to promote yourself. You have to be a salesman. You have to do everything that comes with it. So that's a huge part of it, is that weirdly, I was quite against Instagram when it first came around, which is stupid as hell because it has been where I've sold pretty much 90% of my work, especially since the BP as well. So the internet is the way that people meet you, but that's just where they meet you. I think maybe one person has seen something on Instagram and said, can I have it, without any further conversation whatsoever. What happens is they meet it, they see it on Instagram, then they say, can I come round and see it in the flesh? And that is actually when you meet. So it's all about the meeting. I can't stress how much. It's just like life in general. It's all about the relationships. So these are platforms. They're ways to then get to meeting that person. But it's then all about how you actually get on with that person. And like you said, if you actually just meet anyone in any walk of life who's passionate about something, you have faith in what they do. It comes across from what they're talking about and you want to partake in that. And that's basically what happens when people want to buy work. They want to partake in your life. It's like them having a bit of the artist's life without actually having to be an artist. So when they meet you, they want to actually understand what it is to you making art. Why are you doing it? What are you getting from it? So that they feel like they are part of that experience as well. So yeah, the website and Instagram are so important because it's just how you draw people in to start with, but it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, I mean, we might be moving at a slight tangent, but it's actually a really important point. Instagram has become a brilliant discovery tool for your art. And the website is incredibly useful for capturing people, especially if a newsletter, somewhere you can list events and things like that. Twitter's great because it directs traffic to your website, but it's not such a discovery tool of your art. Obviously, with the art prize, we may look at your website for more information, and that's one of the key resources. And it's incredibly useful if it has your artwork in collections and lots of text, something that can educate us, and something that's nice and simple, so it makes it easier for us. Because if we're looking through several thousand artists or artworks, we can't spend a huge amount of time on it. So we need to have something that makes it easy for us to see your work and engage with it in some way. In terms of applying for the prize, having a website and putting the details of it is incredibly useful. And your Instagram, and to a certain extent, Facebook and Twitter. They're sort of key things as well.
Into that, I guess, as somebody who works with a collection of many unknown artists, I spend a lot of my time trying to find out information about artists and write about them in a historical context. And of course, artists in the 60s and 70s wouldn't have had websites. But gosh, I wish they did. Because just if you're thinking about longevity and how you want to be remembered, just having some documentation and trail of what you've done and why, where that work is just really helpful for future historians.
Yeah, and hopefully Instagram don't kill our profile. But if you enter, you'll be documented for as long as I'm living. So Charlie, going on to sort of the artist side a little bit more, a tricky question, and maybe I need to sort of throw in my thoughts on this as well. But what do you think helped you get into the top 25 for the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize in 2016? If you can remember that far back.
I think it comes down to vaguely what I said before about just making sure you're aware of the thing that you're entering. I think when I first started entering prizes, I was very proud, and pride is never useful. Get rid of pride, throw it out the window. Make some work that you're happy with, but then make sure that you very much adapt accordingly to the thing you're entering. When I first started making work, I would enter competitions with things that I really liked, like very strong, naked, aggressive self-portraits. There are only certain places that is actually worth sending that off to. It's things like that. You live and learn. And for this one, you can see previous years. You can see what's been exhibited. You can see what's won. Then look through your work and say, right, even though I might like this one more myself, this one seems a bit more fitting for what they look at in general. That's not pandering to the competition and saying, well, I'm going to do exactly what they say. You should just always be conscious of that. I think that's just what I've always done, and definitely did that with the BP as well. Just made sure that I put something forward that I thought was fitting for many reasons for the portrait prize.
When I was judging Charlie's entry, filled in everything, filled in artist statement, website, was missing the Instagram, I think, had some artwork commentary, but importantly, the images were super high quality, beautifully taken photographs that give us as close to real life representation of that artwork. I think it was even color corrected. It looked like it had the right colors and everything. So these are sort of key elements that sort of got there. And obviously, we saw the potential sort of early on.
One thing I would also say is that as an artist, you spend a lot of time on your own, making your own work for yourself. If you are thinking of entering something into a competition that you care about, get 5 friends around. Get other people to come look at it and then actually listen to what they say. Even if they say that they hate the one that you love and they like one that you hate, stop and think, right, why have they said that? Do I still feel comfortable putting this forward? At the end of the day, if you're putting it out to judges, it's basically the same thing, isn't it? You're giving it to other people to make their decision on it. So get other people into the studio, which can always be a bit of an awkward situation. It's your own private space, but invite people in, get them to look at it and just get some feedback. It's just so useful.
Oh, yeah, brilliant. That's a very good tip. So for April and Melanie, a tricky one, but I want to ask this. What might you be looking forward to seeing in the entries this year?
So really well chosen, really well photographed, as we've mentioned. It's incredibly important. There were so many entries that just fell flat because of poor imagery. Mm-hmm. So definitely that. And then I'm looking forward to people who have applied but have persisted, reworked their imagery, and are back this year, having already tried quite a few years potentially. I know there might be a few artists like that, but I think persistence is something that's quite admirable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I've seen. I've seen artists enter every year, and it's really fascinating to see how they've changed. So some artists have changed medium, some of them have changed theme, or some of them have developed particular themes and complexity of themes and ideas. And And also just seeing quality of painting going up. So some of the portrait painters, seeing how they've painted people and how that's developed over the years is particularly interesting for me. So I've 5 years of judging. There's always something new and interesting that surprises me. And that's quite exciting. I'm looking forward to see what might happen this year. We've looked through 10,000 artworks, and there's always something that's new and different that I totally didn't expect. So that's one of the things I'm looking for. Do you have anything you might?
I'm looking forward to seeing. I guess it's the diversity and breadth of work, because everybody's work is so unique, different from the next, and it's about putting forward the best work that you as individuals can put forward, as opposed to necessarily, although you're aware of the competition, should be about what you want to do, what you want to get out of it. And I think that means that there should be lots of really high standard work. And for me, it's just the opportunity to see all of that breadth of that. And I take judging quite seriously and will consider every single thing that I see and think about that. So for me, that's a really exciting process. It's a very selfish answer, but that's what I'm most looking forward to, about seeing, the whole variety of works and how people are defining and thinking about what they're putting in and why they're putting it in. I use processes like this just to find out more about what people are making, what artists are making.
Entering prizes, entering competitions, and any other kind of opportunities you apply for, and finding some success. For Charlie, how have you used your successes from not just being shortlisted for the Ashurst Prize, but you've had quite a few successes and a major win as well. How have you used those successes to grow your career?
There's kind of two sides of it. Again, be aware of what you're entering. Do you actually want success? It's also something to really bear in mind. I'd won a few prizes before the BP, which were smaller prizes, and I think there was always this idea that it was going to be more than it was. So I had higher expectations. Then it happens, and then life just goes on. So that was quite depressing. So you have to be aware of that. Then the BP happened, which I really wasn't expecting at all, and what came from that. And my mental health took an extreme battering because of that. I wasn't physically or mentally in a good place, and everything that came from that I found very difficult, and it really set me back. It basically stopped me painting for about 4 months, which is ironic as hell. And I'm now only reaching a point where I feel like I am able to actually benefit from it, because I feel physically and mentally strong enough to do it, and I've had some distance from it. And, it's lovely what it brought my friends and family, but for me at the time, I found it actually quite crippling. So really be aware of what you're actually getting into as well, or at least just be realistic. I was romanticizing, and that is a dangerous thing to do, because life never lives up to that romantic ideal. So that's the first thing I'd say, is actually understand what is going to happen. The fact that life does not change. Winning prizes does not change life whatsoever. It just hopefully allows you to meet more people. So it's just about the fact that it may get your work seen by some other people, but you still have to then go meet those people. Things aren't just going to change overnight. You don't just win a prize and then suddenly, all your work's sold and you're really happy. No, what? That doesn't work. That's not how life works. It's just about the fact that it will allow you to meet some more people. Then you do the same thing that we were saying before, which is you then go and meet those people. So that's kind of the thing that I learned from that. It has since then been easier to sell some works. Hilarious that you were saying about the PDF, because people did then start asking for a price list, and I had to frantically create this thing, which I now have. So it's fine, because I can now send it out to people. But yeah, so the main thing is not, again, to have this romantic Saatchi idea where you think that your life is going to change because something from the outside is going to come and change it. You always have to be the person to change it. Hopefully experiences like this can just open the door in different ways that were unable to be opened before, but you still have to go through that door, and you still have to make those connections and actually do the work. Work doesn't stop. Life doesn't stop. And that's the main thing you've got to remember.
That's a lot of stuff. You can't have any more questions, but, who has a question? Caitlin will have the mic and bring that to you if you could use that first.
Hi, thanks for that. I've got a question for all of you, but I'd quite like Melanie to answer it first. When you see a collection of work by a new artist, what happens if one piece is weaker? And would it let the whole lot down, or would you just focus on the stronger pieces?
Are you asking as a judge, or are you asking me as a curator acquiring
As
for
a
collection?
curator, or just as a visitor to an exhibition of an artist you don't know? If you see a collection of work, would you rather see fewer works and just the strongest ones, or what would happen if there was 1 week apiece? Does that detract from the whole collection, or can you ignore that?
Ideally, I'd see less than I'd see stronger, but I'd be amazed if I loved absolutely everything. I always go into any exhibition or a collection of work anticipating there are going to be things that really speak to me and things that don't. So I think it's fine, although I totally mirror your sentiment that it's incredibly important to edit. I've been sent like just hundreds of images before, and it's so hard to wade through it. I'm like, I wish they'd just sent me 5 really strong ones. But within that, it is fine for there to be things that what one person might see as weak, somebody else might see as strong. So I would anticipate there would be something, but as long as it's the minority of things that are perhaps not as compelling as the rest, I would anticipate that. And that wouldn't detract me from working with somebody. If there's one really strong piece, then I think, okay, this is encouraging, I can work with this person.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a bit related, but you mentioned that having a strong, cohesive work, especially with submissions to art prizes, is really important, rather than showing also a very diverse range of photographs and figurative, etc., or painting. But for someone who is really still emerging, or even still a student in art and is still discovering different media and experimenting, therefore, what would be your advice, and also for the website, let's say, to include everything or be more selective? How to stand out, even though, well, actually, we're still trying to figure out, well, our direction, really.
Yeah, so I probably should have added. So we have 10 judges, so we all have different sort of ideas. So I actually believe that it's better to submit a diverse range of work and across mediums. But actually, to talk about your website, what I think is very effective is on your front page, you have your own short list of your own work, and it could be quite diverse. So there's a good chance that you capture people who like certain things, and then it inspires them to want to look deeper into your website. Whether you should have every single work on the website, I'm not sure. I think that's a matter of taste. I like it because it means I can see everything, and I like looking at everything. But some people might prefer to be, you just pick your own, you edit your own. Like, I think maybe Avril believes that a bit more.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see everything on someone's website. Not at all. I think, again, editing. And I guess when you're starting off, it's less about, you have all these bodies of work with all this sort of, continuous sort of themes. So yeah, I think it's just about picking really strong images and just realizing what your strengths are, really. Yeah.
I also say that can be what Instagram's for as well, rather than your website. I mean, I'm not a judge. This is separate to the judging part, but for your website, that's probably where you should curate it a little bit more and have the really strong pieces that when someone does then eventually go to your website, they see this really like cohesive thing. Whereas with Instagram, I know that the way that people go through Instagram is you kind of scroll quite quickly through it, so you get like an idea of something. And then something stands out and you might slow down and look at that. So if you have that whole list of everything you're doing, if you're scrolling through it, you probably get an idea of what you're actually looking at. So that'd be quite interesting. So I'd say Instagram, throw everything on there that you're excited by, and then maybe curate your website a little bit more.
But make sure also to definitely have a website, because Instagram can just be a bit too confusing, because it's not just your artwork. It could be your coffee, and it can be very cluttered. Some people keep, 2 different profiles, but certainly a website for being very succinct and about your work.
Yeah, definitely do that with your Instagram as well. Is don't put up things of your coffee. Try and be professional, like you're saying. You
have 2 different accounts.
Yeah, and everyone romanticizes the idea of being an artist. But when you meet someone in any way, shape, or form, you want that professionalism. So if you're using Instagram to promote yourself in any way, just think that is kind of your professional look to the world. So just make sure you don't put your coffees and your cats.
So it doesn't answer your question, because the answer is yes and no. Unfortunately, it's a matter of taste between the judges. Brilliant.
about the Instagram, which was answered, I think.
Yeah. Next question was oh, yeah. And then we've got two at the back.
Thank you. Question for Conrad. How do you select your judges?
That's a good question. There's a little bit of word of mouth with the prize. Well, people hear about the prize, but from being out there, engaging with things, not just art exhibitions, but I actually met Melanie at a talk on, what was the talk on? It was on
technological. Well, I spoke on a panel about technological advances and the art sector by Slade and UCL.
Yes, yeah, UCL, yeah. So this was in the Barbican. I think this was in the Barbican. And I thought that Melanie said some really incredibly interesting stuff. So I wanted to talk to her and ask, actually, when we launched the New Media Prize last year, we were constantly having a debate about what does new media mean. And just sort of, within a few words of Melanie, I was like, you know, it would be great to have her as a judge. Am I going to be that lucky? Am I going to be able to convince her? And so we just met, and he went from there. Avril I've known for a long time. I used to do exhibitions in my flat, and one of the artists had an exhibition, and Avril was curious about the artwork, the artist, maybe the venue as well. And we met them. This was a good 5-6 years ago. And we've kept in touch. So this is one of my sort of top picks, you know, when you have people you want to go out and hang out with and see exhibitions with. So that's how we kept in touch. And some of the other judges, I studied briefly at Sotheby's, and one of the lecturers I sort of kept in touch with, and I occasionally lecture at Sotheby's as well. So that's Dr. David Bellingham. One of the other judges was at another talk at an art fair where he asked a controversial question, and I thought it was a fascinating, actually, question to ask the panel at the time. And we sort of talked then. Who else have we got? We've got, it's actually just from sort of going to various types of events. I quite like anything to do with art, not just exhibitions, but discussions, educational stuff, anything that challenges me or makes me think about things in a different way. And that's what I particularly like about the judges we've selected. One, they cover a wide range of tastes and types of what their involvement in the art is, in the art world is. So that's a different question. I haven't thought about that before, but we invite people that we think are highly regarded and will sort of help us really pick the best that we possibly can find. Any other questions? Next.
I feel self-conscious now. Are you prepared to look at works that might be challenging for the collector in terms of the medium, the material, the temporary, the extent, how long it lasts for? Does it need maintenance? Will it fall apart? Some works can be interesting because they contain these properties, but for Ashurst, are you more interested in material that is perhaps a little bbit more user-friendly?
So to tell you a bit more about the Ashurst art collection. So we launched this in middle of I think 6 months ago. It's quite collection. I've sort of stretched the term a bit because they're actually renting the artworks and they're changing them every year. So conservation issues are kind of less of an issue. Health and safety, conservation less of an issue. The Ashurst art collection, I've created a platform that promotes emerging artists. So every artist in the collection is promoted with a website, social media, and coming soon a newsletter and hopefully a catalogue. And every year we add new artists to this. So we hope to promote, in 10 years' time, we hope to still be promoting the artists that were in at the beginning. But we only have the artworks for a year. So it's much less an issue.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what proportion, it's probably a question for you initially, of the artworks that have been finalists and then gone on to do well have been photography
works? And then also, I guess, expanding that question is, what kind of things do you look for in photography?
Good question. I mean, we tried to go. So we've had 5 years. There's been 130 shortlisted artists, and 5 years of winners. We didn't have enough time to look at this properly, but we were going to try and contact everybody and see where they are now. Obviously, Charlie is know all about that. There's another artist called Bob Aldous who, shortly after being shortlisted, he was exhibiting at the London Art Fair. He was taken to the London Art Fair with a dealer. He now has 6 or 7 dealers and doing some really fascinating projects. Oh, so he's a painter. He's a painter. Photography. When we started photography, I think 3 or 4 years ago. Last year. Oh, last year. Okay, last year. Yeah. So yeah, last year we launched the photography specific prize, but we've always accepted photography. Just to highlight that the overall prize winner can be anything. It's just happened to be photography because a bigger proportion of entries is painting. So it has been painting mostly. Well, watercolor 1 year, painting, oil paintings the others. So it's hard to say. I mean, this is something we'd like to know better. We need to go and interview all of them and find out where they are now. But some of them are doing some really fascinating projects. Some of them have found some great success, and some have disappeared. So yeah, it's a difficult question.
Oh, but that's a tricky question in some ways. I think it just has to be, it's hard to sort of pinpoint exactly what I would be choosing. We get such a wide variety of entries using so many different also mediums within photography. So it's so broad. So it's just really about finding great, strong images, and just something quite unique that sets you probably apart from other people. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've probably got time for one or two last questions.
I've got 2 questions, so I'll have to pick. How important is a degree in fine art, a BA or an MA, do you think, in terms of like longevity of the people that you end up wanting to work with, but also for a competition?
So this is a brilliant question. So we get asked this a lot. Maybe a good sort of highlight, a good way to highlight an answer to your question is the winner of this year's prize was self-taught. So she actually has a degree in liberal sciences or liberal arts at Birmingham, but she's a self-taught artist. And we get a wide range. We get a lot of art school students. We've had people as young as 18 and actually even younger. So we have people going into art school, we've got people at art school. We've had people with degrees. The sculpture winner, on the other hand, has a PhD or is studying for a PhD in something really complicated. So first, the sort of art schooling, the art education is relatively irrelevant for us. We're not looking at how you got to where you are now. We're looking at what the artwork and you as an artist now, rather than how you got there. But maybe is there any? Do you find in your selection of artists, do you find a tendency that you tend to focus on the graduates and the people who have a degree, or
it's actually in the judging process, or
in what you've done in the past with
in
artists?
the judging process? It's not information also that we generally come across. I don't think there's a section or a CV that you're looking at, so it's actually irrelevant. I think it's not something I factor in with my art advisory and on my current project specifically. It's a platform called Covet.art. It's non-existent, but in formation as we speak. And there we are looking at emerging, but we've contextualized emerging as recent graduates up to 5 years. And you can be new and self-taught, but I think the idea is that you've been at it for a relatively short amount of time. You have fresh eyes, tons of passion, but also you do need a bit of mentorship, and that's a really important element of something that we're going to incorporate. So it does give you a bit of a step up, and I do believe degree shows nowadays are highly attended, maybe more than they used to be, and a big place to be, discovered. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think it's worth doing an art degree as well, mainly just because I went to Brighton, which had no course structure whatsoever, which a lot of people hated. I loved. It's great for me. But you're just given a studio space, and it's your first insight into just the practice of the world, and you're surrounded by so many other people making that work as well. If you're just on your own making work and you've got a concept, you can just do the same thing over and over and over again. And I learned the most from being at art school, but not from anything I was taught. It's like this weird thing about saying self-taught, because it still insinuates that at art school you get taught a very specific thing, like a technique or a tradition, which doesn't happen at all anymore. So everyone is self-taught, but if you are at an art school, you are just constantly, subconsciously taking in so many ideas and thoughts and questioning your own work. It just gets you into a mindset which is incredibly useful to hold on to. So I think it's still invaluable personally, even though it's very, very expensive. I still think it's worth doing.
I think we have to finish now. So what I'll give you a quick sort of notes on some of the stuff we talked about now. One of the things about entering this prize is the importance of that we're looking for emerging, developing artists with potential. So it's a very ephemeral kind of description, and it doesn't really tell you really what we're looking for. But you've got a hint of that from some of the stuff we've brought up. And I wanted to highlight that, each of the judges have their own tastes and ideas and expertise. It gives us an ability to really understand a wide range of artists and artworks, which is good. We learned that prizes don't give you instant fame. It's not the only tool for success. There are other ways, but it can be a great stepping stone if you handpick the right opportunities to apply to. It does take time, and it does take a little bit of money or a lot, depending on how many you enter. So carefully picking and really working on your application and filling in all information you can is immensely valuable. We sort of vaguely touched, we touched on a bit engaging with the artwork in an online format and in real life and offline, going to exhibitions, versus looking at a JPEG and some text. It's something to think about when you're submitting, that people, trying to get as close to that offline experience as possible, which is what art is meant to be all about, is going to help you do better applications. Hopefully you got to know two of our judges a little bit more as well, which might help you in selecting what to enter. But again, there's 8 other judges, which will make your life a little bit harder. So it is much more about your application and the quality of the photographs and doing as best you can with it. Hopefully you've also learned some top tips as well that'll help you with your entry, and also anything else, and any opportunities, searching for opportunities as well. You got a little bit about the realism of winning as well. Something I learned today is actually, and something that it's been highlighted for me, it is a bit more of a long process. It's not instant. You won't get instant fame. Make contacts and build up your social network. It all takes time. Building up followers on Instagram, getting email subscribers, it's a long process, but keep at it and keep going. Unless you have burning ears all the time, there are people out there talking about you. And the more you can have that, the more can help you as well. So to finish off, if you have any more questions, please email us at info@artprize.co.uk. Thank you again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. It hasn't finished yet. Come and talk to us some more, and have a look at the winners' exhibitions on display now, and hopefully maybe give you some ideas as well. And we really look forward to seeing your art soon, hopefully. So thank you everyone, and thank you to